On this cutting board, I have either a really small turkey or a normal sized chicken. Same concept. This is a chicken. Turkeys are the same exact thing, it's a little bit bigger. So I'm going to show two different methods and talk a little bit of difference between light meat and dark meat, as well as show you how to remove the wishbone. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, first method that I'm going to show you is I'm going to be using tongs here. Most of us use like a fork tine that has the two prongs that we stick into it. That works well, but with tongs, I can grab the legs and I can grab the breast and pull it away from the bone. So I find tongs to be better than the tine in most cases. So for the first half, I'm going to show you how to do it with tongs. Again, we want to be as safe as possible. I know if it's with family, but again, with the way that the state of the U.S. is in at this point with COVID, we want to be as safe as possible. So I'm going to show tongs first, and then most importantly, glove prices have gone back down. So if you can find gloves, go ahead and use gloves. You're going to be able to get into those nooks and crannies just a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and do the left side of the chicken with the tongs, and then also talking about the light and dark meat. As we're looking at this chicken, so you can see it's wing, breast, and leg quarter. Those are going to be your three parts for this half. The first thing I'm going to do is take off the leg. To do that, I'm going to take the tongs and I'm going to pull away. I'm going to run my knife in between the breasts, okay? So everybody can see that as I'm starting to pull away. Awesome. So I can get all of that skin intact. Now, as we get down into here, basically thigh bone is connected to the hip bone. So I'm going to go ahead and pull, and it's going to pop out, okay? Once that pops out, I'm going to go ahead and take my knife and run it along. So it looks like the spine came out just a little bit here. Can this get more difficult? Awesome. So the spine detached from the carcass, making it a little bit harder to pop out, but I can work my knife in and I can find out where that bone is to be able to remove it. And I'm just going to move the knife tip all along the bottom, making sure I get as much meat as possible. Okay, so I have the meat separated on both sides. Just want to make sure there it is. So there's that bone popping out of the joint, and I'm going to run my knife along the inside. Once I do that, I'm going to have my leg quarter right here. So you can see I have a decent amount of skin intact. The leg quarter's been removed. And the next step is we're going to separate the drumstick from the thigh. This part gets a little bit harder. So as I'm looking at, sorry, make sure it's on the camera. So as I'm looking at this, there's a very thin white seam right here that I'm going to run my knife along that's going to separate it. So I can see this thin white line right here. I'm going to go ahead and just push the knife down and all the way through, and that's going to separate the drumstick from the thigh. In just a second, I will show you how to remove that thigh bone, make it a little bit easier. I'm going to go ahead and keep those for later. All right, next step is I'm going to remove the breast. The breast is a little bit difficult because we have this, it's called a keel bone that runs right down the center of the chest plate. So very important, use a very sharp knife. I'm using a utility knife, which is about 5.5 inches. And it is super sharp. I just honed it this morning so I can get in there and get as close to the bone as possible. And that's really going to save me time getting all of the breast off. So using tongs, I'm going to pull the wing back, and then I'm going to basically find the bone. So I'm going to start in the center right here. And I'm going to run the tip along until I can feel the bone and make sure I'm on the correct side. And I'm going to push straight down close to the center. As I'm doing this, you're going to feel it run into the ribs. The ribs start to come around the side here. And once I get to the ribs, then I'm slowly going to angle my knife while still pushing against the ribs all the way down to get it detached. Okay. You know what happened that I forgot? I'm realizing, good thing we can still save it, is I forgot to take out the wishbone. So the wishbone is going to hold the breast together. So with the wishbone, two things here. It's very difficult to do with tongs, so I recommend using your gloves for it. But what you're going to end up doing is you're going to feel this wishbone is sitting right here. Okay, it makes that little arch right at the top, right here. So what I'm going to do is come in with the tip of the knife, being careful not to cut myself. And I'm going to run along the wishbone on both sides. And then from there, the best method that I find is to go ahead and stick my fingers in there. I can grab either side, okay? So right now I'm grabbing its right side. I'm coming up to the top. I'm grabbing the left side, and you can just break it at the bottom. Good. Pinch, pinch, pinch. Oh, bummer, I ruined somebody's Thanksgiving. Looks like I broke it at the top, but I am able to get that wishbone out so I can remove the whole thing. So there's a little bit of meat on it. Again, this is why I recommend using gloves. You can come in and you can pinch all of that meat off. And now I have the wishbone removed. So this is gonna help me with removing the breast. So back to the breast, back to using the tongs. Now that that wishbone isn't holding on anymore, I can just cut straight down. And as I'm doing this, you can see the breast coming apart, right? So you can see where the ribs are, and you're just gonna run your knife along those ribs and towards the outside. Awesome. And then I'm gonna turn my knife and push it away. As I'm doing that, now I can grab with the tongs, which I find to be better than the time. And I can come in and cut every single last little part off to make sure that I'm getting the most amount of meat. And once it starts to give away a little bit, last part is going to be coming down and popping that wing out. Okay, so as I'm coming down in here, awesome, I can see the wing, you can see the joint. I just want to make sure it pops and separates. And there it is. You're gonna have to wiggle around, but basically it's like a knuckle. So you're gonna find that loose part and you're just gonna stick your knife right in there and it will separate pretty easily. So now I have a majority of the meat off. So I'm not leaving a lot of meat left on the carcass, which is awesome. And now I have the breast on the board. So the breast, I'm going to come in and I'm going to remove the wing. So same thing, I'm going to find the bone and I'm just going to cut right alongside of it. So I have this beautiful breast with skin intact. Okay. And I can save this wing for anybody that wants to eat it, pick at it, play with it, or I can use it for a stock later. Now we're going to come back in and we're going to do the other side, but I'm going to use my hands. Okay, so using my hands is a little bit easier. I find that I can move my hands right into every nook and cranny here. So same thing, we're going to do it the exact same way, just using our fingers. So I'm going to start by cutting into the thigh, pushing my knife away, and then I'm going to pop the hip bone and then run my knife along the bottom, making sure I get as much meat as possible. Awesome. And then again, being able to dig my fingers in there and pinch, if it's fully cooked, you're going to get the most amount of meat off as possible. It should be falling right off the bone. Okay, so here I have my leg quarter again. Looks a little bit confusing, but right here we can see that seam, okay, that white seam. So I'm going to bring my knife in. Just go ahead and cut straight down. Awesome. So now I have my beautiful thigh. And then I have another drumstick. Next step is going to be getting the breast off on this side. So same thing, I'm going to dig my knife in and I'm going to find that keel bone, push up against it, and then I can run straight down. You'll feel the bones in there. So as I'm using my fingers, I'm tucking my fingertips back and doing the exact same thing I was doing before, except I'm going to use my fingers to pull away, making sure not to cut myself. Beautiful. And again, using my fingers, I can almost pinch the meat off because it is so tender. So again, if you have gloves, I recommend doing this method. All right, now I have this breast right here, which is sticking up and ready to go. Just have to make sure that I get the wing off. So I'm going to find the joint with my fingers. See if I can get it to separate. Awesome. Beautiful. Okay, so here I have the carcass. The carcass I'm going to use for stock, or because I'm using gloves, I can come in and then just run my fingers across it and get all of this little bit of extra, throw it into the stuffing. That's what I like to do with the skin and the extra here, is throw it right into the stuffing to add a little bit of pairing and flavoring there. So carcass is done and out of the way. Save that for stock, save it for your stuffing, however you want to use that. Next step is I want to get the wing removed. Again, when I'm using my hands, it's much easier to dig my thumb and finger in, find out where it meets, and then I can just cut straight down to get rid of that bone. Okay, awesome. So I have another wing as a little bit of a snack here. All right, next step, two things. One, I'm going to show you how to slice this. So there's two things. I have the skin on here, which we can see is kind of moving around. It's holding on, but it's moving around. How do you keep the skin intact and get it even? Two ways. Number one, you can flip it over. Number two, you want to use a sharp knife. Okay, I tend to flip it over because if I go through here and my knife isn't sharp, it's going to end up pushing down on this and then pulling all of the skin in, which is what I want to avoid. So by flipping it over, and I'm going to come in an angle and cut on a bias cut. Hoping this stays together. I can get that skin to separate and create individual portions of the breast. Okay. Next step is going to be flipping it over. So I'm going to take my knife and just flip it back over. Awesome. So you can see that we have these individual pieces of the skin and the breast. I'm going to go ahead and push my hand on it for the presentation side and lay that skin back out where it wants to go. So we have a beautiful breast that we can lay onto our platter. Okay. Next step is going to be removing the thigh, the bone from the thigh. Okay, so here's the skin on the thigh. We're gonna flip it over. Same thing, I recommend using gloves or your hands. You can always take tongs and then grab the bone and feel it. But basically, when you're using gloves, you can run your fingers along the bone and kind of push the meat to the side when it's cooked all the way through. And the majority of the meat will fall off. So again, right here, you can see just by pushing, I was able to get the majority of the bone out. And then once I get to the end, I'm gonna take my knife and run it along the bottom and around the outside to get that last little bit of bone. So here I have my thigh bone. What I'm going to do is same thing. I'm going to come from the other side this time, just to show, make sure you have a sharp knife, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half, keeping the skin intact so that I can put that on the platter. Okay. And then we're going to do that 2 more times. I'm going to come through and do this breast. I'm going to do it from the skin side with a sharp knife. Again, I'm angling away from myself and getting a nice bias cut here. Making sure to keep that skin intact. Bias cut means just at an angle, and it's going to give a little bit more surface area to it. So it's going to look like a bigger piece than we actually have. Okay, so now I have another beautiful breast. And then I have my last thigh bone here. Same thing, coming in, pinching. All right, well, I'm getting this guy out. Same method. I'm going to use the knife, run along the bone, cut out as much meat as possible. Let's talk about light meat and dark meat. The difference between light meat and dark meat. Some people have a preference. They go for light meat, they go for dark meat. Light meat is healthier. That is, but how is it healthier? Why is it healthier? That is going to be because it has less fat. So our dark meat here on the thigh has hemoglobin, basically, which brings oxygen to the muscles. Okay, that's why it's going to be a little bit darker. It's because chickens are using their legs and they're running around. They don't fly very often, and if they do, it's really just falling. So they're not going to have very big breast muscles to be able to flap their wings. So this, even though we say that the breast is healthier, it really comes down to fat content. Your thigh is going to have a little bit more. It's going to have iron in it, so it's going to be nutrient dense, but it will have a higher fat content, as well as it will have a little bit more connective tissue. So higher fat content, higher in iron, and then higher in connective tissues. The final answer with that is up to you. If you don't want to, if you are avoiding fat, go ahead and go for the breast. But if you want flavor, because fat is flavor, I recommend going for the dark meat. So after all that is said and done, let's see if I can get some height on there. All right. Okay. Okay, so I do have a little bit of a big plate, but bigger plate works really well. So the way I have it laid out, I have my breast fanned out around the outside here. I have my dark meat in the center with my legs standing up for a little bit of height and volume here. So it's beautiful. And then lastly, I'm going to take a little bit of parsley. And I'm going to sprinkle it around. That pop of green is going to help bring that color to that golden brown and white area. So even though we have a chicken, using this, you can see that I have the breast on the outside, I have the dark meat in the center, and then people can come by and pick what they want and what they don't want. So what we learned today is how to get everything off, making sure you're running into the bone using a sharp knife. And then how to take that thigh bone out. As you take that thigh bone out, you're gonna end up cutting it into quarters or halves or whatever portion you would like. Flip it over, that will help keep your skin intact. Or use a really, really sharp knife and come from the top. And we can get this beautiful, beautiful fanning, and then you can present it however you want. Again, I like height. That's very common in the culinary industry. But there we have it. We have our dark meat in the center and a fanning of breast meat around the outside.